This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Welcome to the X-Cast. The truth is in here. I'm going to be your host today, Russ Hugo, and I'm happy to be joined by Jim Beard. Hello again, Jim.
Hey, hi. Good. Happy to be back, but admittedly always surprised to be back.
Same. We'll try not to blow it. There's only one more of the standard season left with the full episode length, so we've got to do what we can. Well, it's great to have you back. Today we're going to be talking about the episode Invocation. This is from Season 8, of course, Episode 5. It originally aired December 3rd, 2000. The director was Richard Compton, and according to IMDb, hopefully this is accurate, he was the husband of actress Veronica Cartwright, who, if you're listening to this, you probably know, played Cassandra Spender in the previous seasons. The writer for this episode is David Amon, or Amon. I'm not sure exactly how that's pronounced. Apologies. Just to kind of give a little bit of background, he actually wrote the last episode we spoke about, which was Aguamala. But in addition to that, he did Terms of Endearment, Rush, Chimera, and then after this episode, in the next season, he does Hellbound and Release, both in 2002. I wanted to share that there to give a picture of what his repertoire is like and how that might kind of inform his writing of this episode in particular. Just to give also another bit of a background of how this episode sits in the season, in the public's eye and fandom, the IMDb rating for this, do you want to give it a guess, Jim?
I looked at the Rotten Tomatoes, but no. I'm not sure. How does IMDb, do they have it go by stars?
Out of 10.
Oh, 6.
Wow. Okay, that's harsh. Usually the lowest episodes are around 7, and then the highest are around 9.
Oh.
So, based on that, you want to adjust your score?
7.
All right, so it's 7.8. It's actually right about in the middle of the season, so not too bad.
Okay.
So to maybe start off, what's your feelings overall about Season 8 of The X-Files? What's your take?
Well, I hope this doesn't get me booted off here tonight, but I've got a confession to make. I have never seen Season 8. I don't expect anyone to remember, but I think I mentioned it sometime when I've been on before. My wife and I stopped watching the show by this season. In fact, I think we got all the way through 7, and we decided that we had kind of had enough. And so I knew about this, in general. I knew that Duchovny was gone and that it's Robert Patrick, right?
Mm-hmm.
Comes in as Doggett, but I have never seen any of this stuff. So it was really interesting for me to come into this fresh, with only a little tiny bit of back knowledge of what the setup was. And I purposely didn't look at anything at all before watching this. Then afterward, I went to Wikipedia and I started looking some things up about the season and the character. In terms of that, it was very interesting, although I think this is just a very, workmanlike episode. There's not a lot that caught my interest. It's a typical so-called Monster of the Week episode. There's a few little things in here that are interesting, and other than that, it's just serviceable, in my opinion.
Did you notice anything in general about Season 8's feel, perhaps even the dynamic between Robert Patrick and Gillian Anderson, or the general production tone? Anything stand out to you at all in those areas?
In terms of how it looked and felt, it felt like the X-Files, absolutely. And I will say that it was interesting to see the dynamic between Doggett and Scully. I had heard that the roles were kind of reversed, that actually, Scully sort of takes on Mulder's role in a way. Doggett was was interesting in that he wasn't exactly what I expected. I didn't realize that he's kind of comes off as a sort of a good old boy. And I guess I was thinking that he was a little bit smoother than that, but he's kind of rough around the edges. I could watch other episodes with him, but I kind of appreciated that, you know, he took on Scully's old role as the I don't believe any of this at all, and it was kind of surprising when he kind of actually got on her case at one point about trying to bring up the idea of the supernatural.
Okay, great. Yeah. Overall, for me, season 8, since this is probably the only time I'll be talking about it, it's something I generally find it to be largely a success. One of the few things I like about it is it has a very consistent tone. It feels very like season 7 to me has a very cold blue hue to it. It feels a little bit more back to the roots Vancouver, even though it's in LA. This one really feels like they embraced the LA spirit, but in a very cold desert tone. It feels like the old film The Hitcher with Rutger Hauer, if you remember that. It has an edge to it. It's not super, super harsh or super dark, but for the X-Files, I like that the season has a flavor and a theme and a flow to it, a consistency. I guess that's the word I'd like to say.
Okay.
I don't love the season. If I think back and to the X-Files, is this my favorite season? Is this the way I love my X-Files? No, but I'm very thankful and impressed with what they did, considering it is season 8 of a TV show, to make something that still feels like the X-Files, like you stated, but still as a whole season feels this fresh is maybe a strong word, but it still feels alive. It still feels like it's doing something. And I put a lot of that on Robert Patrick's shoulders. I mean, of course, the production team's doing a lot of good stuff. I'm not super thrilled about all the writing decisions throughout the season, but a lot of the characterization is generally pretty good, and Robert Patrick is one of the best additions to the show.
Two things. I was hoping that I wasn't going to see Gillian Anderson looking bored. Once again, we're in season 8, and her co-star for 7 years is gone now. She still seemed engaged, and that was good. But again, overall, if Duchovny was there and he took on his old role and she took on her old role, this literally could be an episode in just about any season of the show as far as the writing, plotting. I think maybe I was hoping that the dynamic between Doggett and Scully would lead somewhere else than we're used to with the dynamism between our two leads, and that didn't really happen. I mean, honestly, again, I think that you could have taken this story, Mulder would have fit into it just fine, and the only thing I would say is Doggett wants to bend the rules maybe more so than we've had, you know, in the past. I don't know if Mulder would have bent them as much as Doggett tried to.
I think if you went back and watched the season from the beginning, you would have a different take, because there is a different dynamic between Scully and Doggett than what just comes through in this episode.
Okay.
Some of the other episodes in the season, like if you watch Roadrunners, which I'd recommend watching, it's a brutal episode.
Okay.
But if you start off with just the first few episodes of season 8, you could maybe skip Patience. But if you want to just do the first 2 and then Roadrunners, and then this episode will make a little bit more sense. Okay. And also, if you notice, and we can get into it a little bit, this plot in this case is related to Doggett's arc.
Yeah.
And that is why he's behaving in that way.
Yeah.
Why he's so invested in breaking the rules. So there's a little bit more than what might just come across watching this episode in isolation.
Okay, fair enough. I was trying to judge this just on, you know, what I saw right here. And I did see that after, like I said, I started looking things up after that this is really where that arc about his own son, is that correct?
Yeah.
And that's the photo in the wallet.
Yes.
Okay. And again, I thought that was interesting. Like, okay, wow, this is the episode where that begins. Again, there was nothing bad here. It's competently done. It's competently filmed and competently acted. There's not a whole lot that stands out. You know, there's a few, like I said, there's a few things that stood out to me, but it's very much X-Files. It didn't push the envelope as much as I thought it might.
There are a lot of similarities to a stock X-Files thing. I won't argue that at all. And I wasn't trying to correct you in a critical way because I understand that you were approaching it blind. And I appreciate you bringing that perspective.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify that.
I'm glad that you did bring that up because that is intriguing to me. Yeah, it's kind of funny. I remember when I was going into it, I was thinking, oh, well, maybe this hopefully will be interesting to listeners that I'm coming in pretty cold to this season. and so I'm really glad that you're highlighting those things to me.
Just before we dig into the episode proper, the one last thing I wanted to share about the episode in particular, and we're talking about similarities to Monster of the Week and could this go in any season? And in some senses, when I first watched this, I thought, oh, this is season 8's version of the Commissary. I don't know if you remember that episode, I believe from season 2.
Vaguely, yeah.
Yeah, it starts off, the cold opens very similar. There's a similar kid in kids in park atmosphere. There's lots of balloons.
Yeah.
There's kids are about the same age that are in there, and they're kind of demanding and creepy in different ways. The child is separated from the mother, and then even the kid in this episode, Josh, kind of looks like the creepy kid from the intro of the Commissary. So there's some fun overlaps there. It is 8 seasons that are kind of going to repeat themselves a little bit. But it also, even more in some ways, reminds me of an episode of Millennium, season 3, called Through a Glass Darkly, which also starts off with a park abduction from a kid on a swing also, and it has a very similar plot resolution turnabout regarding abuse. And so there's some commonalities. And also the atmosphere of this episode, down the middle, if you took away the child ghost angle in that family, this could, in my opinion, be a season 3 Millennium episode, particularly the plot with Ronnie Purcell and then the creepy, I don't know if it's a stepdad or who it is. It's taken directly from that feeling. So you can kind of tell Millennium's been canceled, but they're bringing some of that atmosphere into season 8. With that, let's just transition now and talk about Invocation.
Alrighty.
Worth mentioning here before we get to the cold open is this is where we're really diving into the Molderless era of season 8. So no spoilers for you, Jim, but he is in some of season 8, whether in flashbacks, cutaway scenes, or actually maybe proper. I won't spoil it, but FYI. But this is where it kind of begins, where you actually get some real intense time with just Scully and Doggett together. So our cold open begins in September 21st in 1990. We've got a circle of ponies outside of a pentagon, and the creepy drifter shows up, who reminds me, and I'm sorry to keep jumping over to Millennium, but it's so similar. It looks so much like the character Samael if he had a younger brother. A child disappears from a swing, and then the mother just freaks out immediately, like seems to tell something is wrong. It just ramps up to 10 right away. And this is one thing that's kind of odd with how panicked she was and how most of the passerbys didn't seem concerned or bothered, except kind of annoyed by her yelling.
Yeah.
And then it ends with the drifter, who we eventually find out, of course, later is Ronnie, holding the kid's backpack for some reason near the ponies, and then he drops it on the ground. Mm-hmm. Which I thought was kind of an odd thing, thinking back about the episode. Like, why does he have the backpack? And then why did he drop it there? Considering what we see in flashback later. So that's a little bit of a setting of the scene. In general, considering when you watch it blind, how effective do you think the cold open is? And then knowing what happened actually, how successful do you think it is? What's your take on this?
It's a standard opening as far as I was concerned. The only two things that really stuck out to me was the shot, and I always like a shot like this. It's the shot of, we're back a little ways, there's something right in the foreground. The kid is on the swing, and he swings into frame, and then behind, I think it's a person or a tree or something that's closer to us. And then, of course, it's because you know what's going to happen. The swing comes back, and he's not on it. It's a kind of a standard kind of like a horror, film type of shot, but I like it because it's really effective. The other thing that really stuck out to me is the music really reminded me of the theme from Poltergeist, the original Poltergeist, with the kids with the wordless singing. It's like a, la, 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 la kind of a thing. And it's got this real sense of both innocence, and then there's also something very creepy about it too. And I really, really thought that that's what that was inspired by. I guess I would question, as far as like, once we know what's going on, like what exactly Ronnie did in the, like, what did he do that we didn't see? Did he literally just walk up and grab the kid off of the swing?
He injected the kid with it's implied that he had the needle ready.
And why take his backpack off? Like, you're abducting somebody from in the middle of a whole bunch of people. Like, you're really going to sit there and wrestle a backpack off? I think it's one of these cases where, to be more poetic or visually effective in the setup and what's going on, you kind of fudge some other details and you don't really worry about it. You just move on from there.
I would agree that it sets a nice mood, works well for that. Some of the pieces don't quite fit together as nicely as they could in some ways. For example, what Ronnie's doing there, that particular environment, could he actually abduct somebody? Could you stick a kid with a needle in that environment and not get noticed? Very unlikely.
Yeah.
But we don't know that till the end. We can shut off our brain and just enjoy it for what it is. And who knows, if there's a ghost kid that can appear who's actually completely corporeal, then maybe Ronnie can pull off this incredible Mission Impossible style number.
And it's implied that he takes him off the swing while he is swinging. and well enough that it doesn't disturb the arc of the swing either. Again, it's like, I really do like that shot, but it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But I'll go with what you're saying. It's an effective setup.
It's trying to be cute in some ways and showing the actual villain at the very beginning with the overhead shot of the ponies. So it's introducing all the pieces. There's some elements of it where it's kind of a bit sneaky in the sense of the symbol and how that symbol fits into the pentagram, and it's so disproportional in the logo on the actual carriage and then what the kids are drawing. So it's really hard for the viewer to even think about there being a possible connection, because the opening object that we see from above is so symmetrical. But the episode wants to be really cute and think that this was planned and obvious from the beginning, which, yet, it's fairer than a lot of X-Files episodes that if you're paying attention, okay, you could make this guess, but you don't actually get enough information. It feels a little bit cheating, but not in a bad way. And just because we're talking about the episode, I'm gonna point that out, not because it's actually an issue, but that's what we do here, is we nitpick.
I was also maybe a little surprised at how right off the bat, the writing, the episode, the setup really doesn't evoke much sympathy for the mother. And I didn't feel for her really as a character throughout the entire episode. But right off the bat, it's incredibly annoying. Or she's a typical distracted parent. She's more concerned with chatting away with, her friend than watching her son. That's a typical setup. Mom, look at what I'm doing. A certain morality play going on here. Parents who don't watch their children lose their children. The character just doesn't come off very well, and neither does the father, for that matter. I felt for the children, but not really for the parents at all.
I don't even think that children come off well. Maybe the only people who have any moderate appeal in the episode would be the sheriff and the psychic. Otherwise, everybody's pretty repugnant, in at least the way they're portrayed. Or, that's a strong word, they're at least very abrasive or cold. Because I don't necessarily think that Lisa Underwood, the character, the mother, is written as someone who is neglectful or incorrect. But I think the direction makes her performance feel a little less natural at some points, a little bit more aggressively reactive. And in some worlds with this kind of trauma, it makes a little bit of sense. But like we talked about, the fact that right out of the gate, as soon as she doesn't see him on the swing, assumes he's gone, as opposed to maybe he just ran over to look at the ponies.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a million other things that could happen. I think we've all been there as children with our parents when, some situations like that, and they've never amped up to that degree that quickly. So it creates a disconnect between me as a viewer and her as a character as being a real mom, and maybe does go back into that morality play. But if that's the case, it's a very unfair one, because she's there in eyeshot simply having a conversation with another adult. And if the writer intended it to be a morality play about that to some degree, it's an incredibly cruel, and I would say even misogynistic, it's a strong word to use, but I think it could go there to make that claim that somehow that she's not allowed to have a conversation with somebody in a generally safe, parent-filled environment where a child's playing 10 feet away.
Yeah.
It's a lot of incongruity that right off the bat makes it hard for me to connect to her. And then she doesn't connect with the other son, and she doesn't connect with the father.
No.
Largely to his complete emotional stonewalling until the very end. Again, part of the episode, not to get too far ahead, and I guess we'll just get to it now, but the weakest part of the episode for me is the family drama and the children. The Ronnie Purcell story has a lot more going on, but it's given such little time in comparison.
Yeah, it's definitely a family that I didn't really care much about as a family unit. I did have sympathy for both boys. And this is interesting what you're talking about the reactions over the abduction. When I was a very small kid, I actually disappeared from my family. We were at an amusement park called Cedar Point. It's in Sandusky, Ohio, and they literally said it like that, like they literally they weren't paying attention. They thought my older brother had an eye on me, and he didn't, because he was doing whatever he was doing. And I literally just started walking, and I wandered off. And then finally it dawned on me that they weren't around me anymore, and I was lost. And I remember very, very well being found by an employee, and they took me to a lost children area. And I remember seeing my parents, coming up to that area, and how frantic my mother was and everything. But so I was absolutely terrified. I can't even begin to imagine how well both boys felt, both being abducted. At first, I didn't feel for the brother. It's funny, I say the older brother, and he's actually the younger brother, Josh. I did start to really feel for him. He was thrust into a situation not of his making. It was a complete stranger who came back to them. He was in the womb when Billy, I couldn't think of the kid's name, Billy disappeared. This is a complete stranger, and then he's, for the most part, he's being ignored after that. Yeah, a lot of the family stuff just didn't really ring true. I didn't like the mother. The father was pretty much a cipher for the most part, other than being a stereotype.
Yeah, and before, I didn't hate it. I just didn't connect to it as much as I did the other plot line. Yeah. And the younger son, Josh. Well, actually, I think both the kids did a good job with what they were given for being child actors. Excellent. Yeah. Good job. Yeah. It's just there's not a lot for especially Billy to do, and he's given a lot of repetitive things to do, and a lot of time is spent on it trying to ramp up the creep factor. Yeah. And it doesn't always land because of the reactions and the interactions of the parents. It's a difficult one to talk about because I don't think it's an abject failure. Like, there's a lot of bad decisions here being made or terrible acting. It's just a little wooden and a little predictable and a little bit cold, but it's not bad. At least I wouldn't go that far.
I think when I've been on the show before, I've brought this up a lot about how much shorthanding is done. And I've done a lot of podcasts about half-hour shows, and we talk about that a lot, that a script has to sacrifice so many things when you have so little time. that you need to shorthand things. And I kind of felt like that here. There's not enough time to really sketch out the family more than what we got, because you have to handle the Scully and Doggett, relationship. You have to have that, and then they try to bring in the other characters like the psychic and the sheriff. So the family really, gets short shrift, in my opinion.
No, I completely agree. And I'm not expecting too much to come out of a 45-minute piece of television. Mm-hmm. It's one of the things they have to attempt. And sometimes the actors have chemistry and can pull it off and work with those shorthands. But in this case, I'm not sure there was too many successfully resonant scenes. There were a few between, one in particular I can remember, between the mother and Billy that I think landed really well. And there was one, again, maybe between Josh and the father that felt real-ish, but for the bulk of it, none of them were quite working to even a fifth, if not a tenth, of the power of the one scene we got between Ronnie and Cal. That one scene outside the car has 20 times the emotional vitality and intensity.
And that had me squirming.
Yeah. It was incredibly well done. I mean, both the acting and I think the writing was trying to get at something. And maybe that's what made the rest of the episode more difficult, is I was able to look at that and have that scene take me out and go, okay, this is what I want to be watching. And then when it went back to the other scene that felt so lifeless in comparison.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's supposed to be a dichotomy, being shown between the family and the nice house and the people who live in a trailer and have a junky car and all of that. Ronnie and Cal are pretty much stereotypes. The girlfriend or whatever she was, kind of a stereotype. But yeah, that scene at the car, was really effective, and it made me squirm. This is funny talking about the mother. One of my, if I had to have maybe a scene that kind of sticks out with her is. And Doggett really is when Doggett does the thing with early on with the backpack and Billy. I actually really like that scene now that I think about it, where he's like, "Here's the backpack. Do you recognize it?" And Billy reacts to it, and then Doggett's like starts to take it away and sort of uses it as a lure or a reward. Like, you can't have this until you start talking. And when the mother realizes what's going on and she races in there and what the hell are you think you're doing? I actually like that scene.
I agree. But again, that was between Doggett and her. But yeah, that was one of the scenes that I think worked. I think it worked also because you jump back and forth, being able to relate with both perspectives. It's an amplification of the Scully-Doggett dilemma that goes throughout the rest of the story. But maybe just to jump to the next major scene, we go 10 years into the future and we get our place. We now know we're in Oklahoma, in town of Dexter, and the mother arrives at school, I think, to pick up Josh, and who informs her that there's some people looking for her, and then there's a group of adults over by a swing set, and it's very, very stagey. And it reminds me a lot of, again, early X-Files, like the Red Museum or something, where it just seems, okay, it's fine, but it also makes you think something else is afoot in a different way, and they slowly move away to part and then see Billy on the swing set. Yeah. And it seems odd that there wouldn't be a little bit more panic and energy, and the cops wouldn't be there already. Things like they're just going to wait for the mother to show up, but they're not going to wait for the cops.
Thank you. You really hit it twice on the head. Number one, yes, it was stagey. These people are they purposely standing so close together to hide the little scene behind them? But yes, terribly stagey. And then they part like the Red Sea. And we get the bum, bum, bum. But that's the first thing I thought. Where are the cops? No, this is not how this would go. Not really. I'm so glad you brought that up.
And I get the lineup if they want to shield the mother from the shock.
Yeah.
But I'm just not sure if that actually happened in the real world. And I know we're watching the X-Files. The X-Files tries to be emotionally resonant. Yeah. That there would not be a little bit more energy and murmur, and the principal would be a little bit more breathless and panicked. I mean, that's a pretty incredible situation, and they seem very stoic.
Yeah.
And
well, it's not just that the child has been found after 10 years, which is incredible enough, but that he hasn't aged a single bit. Those people there at the school, they don't need to even have the blood work and the other things that they went through, whatever. They can see that the kid has not changed one single bit. So it's doubly weird. And right, there's not enough reaction going on. In fact, I kind of thought that through this whole thing. Despite the mother's love for her son and that it's a miracle and all of that, it's like she wasn't reacting enough to your child has not changed one iota in 10 years. There needed to be a little bit more reaction to that. I agree.
That could have been another angle for struggle, because it was like, well, I'm just glad that he's back. And I get that. And I get that was supposed to be the difference. And then the father's supposed to be like, who is this kid? And they're going to play up that angle. But there was a lot more that they could have explored. Even using shorthand, there could have been a little bit more confusion. And
the father could have kind of freaked out a little bit more or gave it even more emphasis when he's talking with his wife about how crazy it is. I mean, they really could have had that ramped up. I can't think. Lisa, is it like Lisa, and like have him be so frustrated that the veins are popping out on his head, like, what are you not getting? It's completely weird. This isn't normal. This isn't right. And we didn't really get that.
And perhaps it's because they needed to give something. They pushed a lot of that onto the Doggett-Scully dynamic. Script-wise, I understand that.
Yeah.
But they could have, at least, especially when the first few times were introduced to it, because they kind of cut ahead in time to assume that already happened by the time they go to pick him up from the police station and Doggett's doing the interrogation. It's implied, or at least I inferred from it, that they had already been around enough time to kind of process that angle of it. But I don't think you'd get over it that quickly. And I know the mother's supposed to be portrayed as being so desperate, but it has been 10 years. There's a lot. I'm just with you. It's a minor thing, but I think it would have made the family dynamic a little bit more interesting to add that wrinkle a little more foregrounded, even just a tiny in the drama, in the performance, even if it's not in the writing.
Let me throw this out here. The story shows that the parents are not on the same page in their relationship and what's going on. Very sadly, married couples sort of tend to split and break up after the disappearance or the death of a child. It's kind of like didn't ring true to me that 10 years later, these two people are still together. When they don't seem to be very fond of each other. Did they stay together just because of Josh or what? But that didn't really ring true to me either.
Yeah, I was fine with that in the sense of they're an individual couple and different people are able to do it. It's more of a common circumstance that has variability as opposed to a completely uncommon situation where a child manifests out of thin air. In the same sense where how can you not spend months dealing with the complexities of that?
Yeah.
And how that's going to psychologically affect every little aspect of the relationship with your family.
Yeah.
You just came to grips with it a little bit too quickly and playing the card that, it's just a concerned mother who all she cares about is that her son is back. Again, is oversimplifying and being a little maybe gender essentialists. And I'm sorry to use, too many political words in this. In this thing, but it feels a little bit that way that, she's a mother, that's all she's going to care about.
Yeah.
And she just wants her kid back and it's going to stop there. And then the father is kind of an unfeeling, it's irrational, so I'm not even going to address it or recognize that it's real. And that again feels essentialist.
I love this hammering this point home. The dad is for Josh and the mother is for Billy. Mother and Billy are both fair-haired, and of course the dad and Josh are dark-haired. So, if you didn't already get this point, it's hammered home visually too, that who is for who in this whole thing.
Shorthanding. Nice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just to jump back to the police station, and then they do the quick interrogation with the backpack that you mentioned. And here we get our first major confrontation between Scully and Doggett, where Doggett mentions that he worked on the child abduction task force. Mm-hmm. And then Scully's first claim, playing the Mulder card, you're ignoring that he is 7 years old. And then Doggett comes back with failure to thrive, diseases that delay puberty. And then she says he's not sick, and Doggett responds, good, then he can talk. There's a few things here I like. One gives them both a different dynamic of aggression than the Mulder-Scully relationship. I mean, of course, Scully always was very assertive and held her own, but I think Doggett is more blunt. And they really held true with like his quote unquote blue collar working class origin of that's very pragmatic. Yeah. I think that's the difference is Scully is very analytical and rational. But able to play a little bit with that distinction, which isn't super clear at the macro level of like, okay, now they flip roles. But I think in this scene, the writing is pretty good. It's pretty snappy here, where you get a good little bit of spark between the two. And Doggett's claim about, failure to thrive, that's a believable thing for somebody with his background. He's not coming up with some crazy, obscure scientific disorder that only Scully would know that she learned through some crazy journal while in med school. Right. That's something that Doggett might know even as a normal citizen, but let alone being on a child abduction task force. Yeah, I'm sure he's encountered it. This scene was a highlight example of when the episode's really working, I thought. What's your take on this first encounter?
I agree. I really liked it when Doggett brought that up. The possibility of stunted development or whatever, because it's a moment where that's what I'm thinking, and then the character goes ahead and brings that up. That was interesting because my first impression of him is that, he's kind of just a grunt. And then I thought, okay, well, he's thinking. He's trying to think. I did like that. I was looking forward to how those two characters interact, and I got a good scene, right off the bat there. And then it goes from there when Doggett then goes in to talk to Billy. Pretty much that entire whole, set of sequences there, I did really like.
Later, Scully and Doggett are at the hospital at night, and this is after Scully has talked to the doctors and find out he's the quote-unquote same boy. There's no cavities, no tooth decay. And here's where that reversal comes even stronger. She refers to other X-Files cases, including alien abductees who have had similar issues. And
to hear her say that is so funny. Like, wow, have the tables really turned now?
And then Doggett refers to Ronald Purnell in the case files, and he'll go through his criminal record, which were sealed juvie records that he got, and Scully chastises him. So at this point, we also get a rule-bending division trying to establish some character dynamics. And then why would Doggett, who up until now is generally seen as somebody who plays by the book, go this far? We later learn, of course, because of the connection with his son. Overall, how do you feel about this character beat in this scene for both of the characters? How did it land for you?
It landed very well. Again, as an extension of the previous scenes. I think maybe in the end I hoped, or I would have liked more of that going on. I did wonder where he got that file that he wasn't supposed to have.
I figured it's just because it's a small town that you can talk and strong arm the right people.
Yeah, I guess I didn't really get a sense of that, but no, it all, rang true to me and was very interesting.
The next major scene, Billy is being tucked in, and then he gets up, and then we see the parents fighting, and the door is left open very awkwardly, and this is probably the most staged scene in the episode for me. And I know we just talked about how they're not having this conflict about the reality of the situation, and I know this scene they kind of are, but it's more about the behavior of the child, and that's not my son, or he doesn't feel right. It just seems very black and white. I know it's a small scene or a short scene, but I feel, getting back to our point, maybe what would have made it resonate a little bit better is if they introduced some of that mutual confusion to create a little bit of unity within the dissonance. So there's a little bit more humanity. Instead, it's just the father comes off as a remote, emotionless, uncaring person, and the mother as a delusional, blind caricature. And the fact that they're going to leave the door open while they're arguing when the children are there in this situation is almost as unbelievable as a child coming back as a apparition. In this scene, when there's that kind of like trauma and sealing and protection of kids, I don't know. Just houses I've been in my life, that whole setup would not have happened. And it's also unnecessary, except for us as the viewer to see it as the camera pans. The door could have been closed. We could have heard it. I think it could have been a little more powerful because the acting and the staging was so awkward because they had to get in the framing of the door. Overall, that scene, I know it's a minor one, was probably one of the weaker, if not the weakest point of the episode for me.
Yeah, the word that I would use is cliched. Really, and awkward, like you say. I think I've already expressed that, I'm not very fond of this family at all, and it's hard to feel sympathy for them because they are pretty much cliches.
What do you think about the setup with Billy going into Josh's room with the knife and then stabbing next to...
That I actually liked. When we actually see that he has a knife, that was a nice little jolt that I appreciated. That, okay, I didn't expect him to suddenly have a big, hunting knife. This is kind of funny as a little aside. It made me wonder when the mother's tucking him in his room, did they keep that room, his room, like that for 10 years? Is it one of those cases where they kept it exactly the same and didn't touch anything at all? Because it looks like, it's not like they turned it into an office, or something like that. It looks like they kept Billy's room like that for 10 years.
And considering the cliches of television, that's what would happen in most child abduction stories. That I felt okay. It didn't bother me at all. I just assumed that as a given that they did.
Yeah.
I did have a question, though, about the knife. So this knife magically appeared. I mean, no, he's a ghost that magically appeared with clothes and everything else, and he's fully stabilized, but they don't really explain it. Suggested later on that this is the knife that he was killed with, because we see Ronnie using the knife, I think, to cut the ropes that have bound Billy's wrists in the flashback. Yeah. But it's interesting that, okay, he gets this knife, which has his blood on it, somehow magically appears, and then he stabs the mattress next to Josh.
Yeah.
It's not really clear why. In the sense, is he trying to warn Josh because of what's going to happen to him? But it's not really a warning. It doesn't seem to be done out of any care for that. It's only going to come across as threatening, but it also isn't, story-wise, actually a threat. And the knife provides no actual purpose in the story.
And the knife keeps on existing, but you're right. There have been reports of ghosts and things like that have seemed completely real, tangible, corporeal forms. I mean, especially in all of the stories of the phantom hitchhikers, the people, the girl at the side of the road gets into a car and the driver has no inkling that she's not really there, that she'd swear that it was but this takes things several steps further. I mean, this kid has had blood drawn from him by medical people, Scully examined him. I mean, his mother's hugging him and everything, and then he somehow manifests this knife. Again, I don't think we're really supposed to think about that. Interestingly enough, for me, was that by this point, I'm still trying to guess what the deal is going to be with this kid. I'm not so sure where it's going. I didn't read the plot beforehand. And I thought that too. So he plunges the knife into the kid's bed and then that's it. I didn't even really think much past that. Like, is it like a warning, like you say? I mean, I suppose that's probably what they were going for, but yeah, it's pretty nebulous.
I get why they would do it for story pacing wise, because they want to create a threat and make Billy look like, oh, he's the ghost is the problem.
Value. I mean, that's pretty much what it is.
But narrative, it doesn't really come through and make much sense. Actually, speaking of the ghost coming back and being identical and doing the blood draw, that's a unique twist on this old familiar tale, and I think one of the successful things about the episode that works really well for me is it's a subtle play on a very similar story we've seen throughout the X-Files. It provides that angle for the family to accept it a little bit more readily, maybe as we've been talking about, maybe a bit too readily, but it still allows for a different dynamic through the story. So I give kudos to whoever came up with the story, if it was the writer or whoever did that. I like that aspect of it, and it works well. It's just the knife thing is a little bit of a red herring. It's a minor point.
Yeah.
The knife has his prints, and then I think Doggett says, you make it sound like he's possessed. Maybe he's trying to communicate something. Then Scully says, don't you think this is weird? And then Doggett spots a symbol on the knife, and they spot that carving symbol, which the cops recognize and mention the police psychic, and the psychic came up with that symbol. They're pretty bad cops. If a major person who was there and you interviewed and had a police juvie record is affiliated with an organization, and probably the only outside organization there at that park that day with that pony ride has that same logo, and you didn't make that connection,
Right.
that's hope you don't get a pension at that point.
You know, the very first thing I thought of when they had the symbol and they started talking about it, I thought of the Blair Witch Project.
Exactly, because it's uneven. That's the thing is, which I guess works because Cal does not seem like a character who would make a meticulously drawn or pentagram-ish without the five-lined star. I don't know what the...
I had to go look it up as soon as I was done, and sure enough, Blair Witch Project was 1999, and this is from 2000. My thought is that in production or whatever, they wanted to evoke that. That was still a big deal at this time, that movie. And that figure, symbol, stick thing or whatever that was, a focal point of the movie. But that's the first thing I thought of was, oh, okay, so it's some kind of witchy thing. It didn't turn out that way, but that is the very first thing I thought.
Oh, good observation.
Hi, this is Veronica Cartwright. I play Cassandra Spender, and you are listening to the X-Cast.
But the next scene is where it starts off with the mother buttoning the shirt on Billy. And this was the first scene where I actually felt a real connection between the mother and any of the other characters. And here's where I think the actor did a good job connecting. The scene kind of goes sideways towards the end, but then there's a scene where she tries to pull him up and he gets really scared. And then Josh is creeped out. Things become a little bit more cartoonish where she comments to the husband, take him, Doug, if it's such a strain on you. It's okay in the sense that it provides the opportunity for Josh and Doug, so the father and the other son, to have like a shared glance, which I thought worked well. They get in the car and then Billy disappears. So again, Billy and the father get in the car. Billy disappears, and then all of a sudden he's up in Josh's room again. And then there's a good creepy shot of Billy. So writing-wise, one thing here I think works better than the knife. That this makes sense that we have Billy wanting to be near Josh, which is giving us the clue that something is going to happen to Josh. And Billy is maybe a prophetic apparition to help prevent that. The knife, I don't think, works as well as this scene does. I also like the interaction between the mother and Billy, finally, that we actually I felt something in this scene, but it's not perfect, but one of the more successful scenes with the family overall, considering a lot had to happen in this bit. What's your take on this scene after my long ramble?
I pretty much agree with you about the scene with the mother and Billy. I did sort of wonder, Billy shows one of his first real reactions when she says that they're going to take him to a doctor. and that's when he starts to, do that pull away or whatever, and she has to lift him up. It does sort of make me wonder, now that we, more or less know what Billy was, like, what was that reaction? Was that an innate childish reaction to not wanting to go to a doctor, or was that if you want to call this thing a ghost, why was he afraid that would blow the whole thing open? In some ways, this apparition, whatever you want to call it, is still a child. It's still operating on a child's level, a child's intelligence level, or if the thing with the knife was kind of ham-fisted, well, that might have been, that's as much as they could muster up as a child to do something to warn his brother. And then I made a note of it too, I really do like the car scene. I really like it. I think it was done very well that Billy suddenly isn't there. And I don't know why I didn't see it coming, but Josh turns around and Billy's right there. That was a nice little, gotcha kind of moment. But yeah, I pretty much agree with what you're saying about Lisa and Billy and their scene together.
Once we switch over to the other Purnell plotline, wanted to finish here talking about in the Underwood household that this is where Scully and Doggett meet with the psychic.
Yeah.
And we get a clear explanation for what's happening. There are very powerful forces at work, drawing him to his brother.
Mm-hmm.
I feel this force. What are your thoughts overall here about, because I think, well, actually, before I say that, so this plays into what you were just speaking about in the sense that, it's something is happening. It is related to his brother. In this scene, we have another confrontation. The father's very angry about the psychic, or he's just angry. And Sharon shakes Billy's hand and then finds out, there are very powerful forces at work. And then coming through you to Doggett. So she says that to Doggett, that the forces are coming through him. So you lost someone just like Billy in order to make that connection. And being that this is the first episode where we start to learn that about Doggett, this and the photo are pretty much all we're given. And it's a nice subtle start.
Yeah.
And then she has the symbol appear on her forehead and a bunch of strange sounds are made. What's your take on this whole scene here with I know that's a lot.
I made a note about this, that this is where I think I really sat up and started to take notice. I gotta admit, my attention kind of wavered through here up until this point, and this brought me back. Even though, and I've been saying this about things in this being cliched or stereotyped, the character of Pearl, even though she's kind of a cliched psychic, fictional psychic, I really thought she was interesting, and I really hoped that there was going to be more with her. Like, that was, what we got in that whole scene was interesting enough to me that I wish that they could have used her somehow more. I thought, okay, well, maybe she's going to be with, our heroes for the rest of the time, but she doesn't. She just disappears after that. But I like that whole thing. I could see some eye rolling when she starts saying, like, great forces are at work and all of that, because it's like typical things that typical psychics typically say. But then when she looks at Doggett and starts to bring out his experience, then that to me that really got interesting. And then, yeah, the sounds, and I really like this aspect of it, because stuff like that really creeps me out. The sounds, things where like they get recorded and you really have to listen to it, and things like that. I was actually on a ghost investigation at the place that I work. The building that I work is a very, very old building, 1800s, a lot of history there. And they let local ghost hunters do an overnight thing, and I was there as a representative of the company, and they did sound experiments, and that was really fascinating and very creepy. So this is maybe probably my favorite part of the whole episode, the whole thing with the psychic and then the sound recording.
Are you going to share those with the Facebook group, the XCast, so we can hear them, the ghost recordings? Did you still have those?
The ghost investigators have that. It's been a few years. No, I wish I kind of did. It wasn't anything like very conclusive, but very strange, some of the things. And they did it in a couple different ways. They did it where they literally just had a recorder and they asked questions, and then they paused in between questions and then played the tape back. They allowed space in between each question, so if somebody somewhere wanted to answer. And there was some weird stuff there. And then they also did the so-called, I think it's called a ghost box, where it has I think it has words or somehow in its database, and that supposedly spirits are able to pluck out words from it. Oh, and you know what? And they also did a thing where with just a radio where they let it cycle through stations. It's a lot of static or whatever, but supposedly the spirits can bring out words from that. But no, I wish I had all those things, because there was some really interesting moments in that.
Well, if you find them, you could share them with the group.
Okay. I'll have to see I don't know if they came back to us after like a few weeks and we sat down and went over things, but I'm trying to remember if they sent the actual recordings to me, but I'll take a look. Sure.
Now let's jump over and talk a little bit about the Purnell plotline. So originally we have Doggett show up, and it's a dilapidated trailer near, looks like some oil derricks and other various scrapyardish equipment. And we see Ronnie, who's now 10 years older. It's the same actor with some eye makeup and different facial hair, which, in HD may not work as well as some others. But considering TV at the time, it's not too bad. They have a confrontation, at which point Doggett eventually just leaves. We later come back to the scene where Ronnie pulls up. We're assuming maybe it's his mother, and then the boyfriend of the mother, or then Calla arrives to visit the mother, who is, we later learn, the person who was taking care of the ponies. The actor Jim Cody Williams appears he hasn't done a lot of other, he's been in a lot of other like cameos and background acting work, it looks like, but I thought his performance was very strong and very intimidating and really creepy, very gross. And at this point, as soon as you see his truck pull up, we know, story convention-wise, whoever is in this truck is the killer. After their confrontation, Ronnie runs out to the woods, starts digging, and then he finds a skull, obviously because he doesn't believe that Billy is back, because he remembers everything else that happened. What are your thoughts about this whole plot line, the conflict between Doggett and Ronnie, and then the relationship between Ronnie, Marcia, and then Cal?
I'm really embarrassed now. Is it his mother?
I don't know. That was just my assumption.
Okay. A little bit ago, I said the girlfriend or whatever she is. I never ever got that was supposedly maybe his mother, because I don't think there's enough difference in age there. I could be completely wrong, and I'm just going to assume you're right. But now I'm really red-faced here that I figured that, because, and then it started to get weird to me when Cal and the woman are playing kissy face and everything, and I thought, wow, it's Ronnie's girlfriend, and yet she messes around with this guy right in front of him. Oh, that's terrible. I have to admit one other thing. Yeah, you're right. Cal shows up, and it's like, the warning sign, the warning alarm goes off, and it's like, oh, this guy's is bad news. But the very first shot of the father of Josh and Billy's father, when he walks up next to the mother, I don't know why, but I even said it out loud. I said, "Oh, that's your killer right there. It's him." And I don't know why. I just got that little psychic sense, and then but when Cal comes in, I threw that right out the window. I was still guessing what the hell's going on at this point, but this is like all I could look at all this whole scene and all these people and say, what awful people and what an awful place they're in.
Shortly after, we have another scene where Ronnie comes back to the car and tries to drive away, and Cal comes out and abuses him even further and says, "Better mind your P's and Q's or I'll tell the cops what you did to that little boy. Well, you got buried out there in the woods." Obviously, for the audience, assuming here we're trying to be thinking, oh, it was Ronnie who did it, but we later know, of course, it's because this is part of the abusive pattern, and that he, of course, abused Ronnie in the past and then recruited him to aid in the abuse. I guess that's another reason I wish there was more time spent here, because we spent all of this time with this middle-class child who, of course, met an unfortunate end, and there's the dynamic in the family there, but we have this very tragic story with Ronnie, and he doesn't really get much room to have any space for sympathy, and that's largely the 45 minutes. But again, if we talk about script doctoring, I would have reduced some of the other scenes with Billy teleporting and just spend a little bit more time with Ronnie, and there's that one scene he has with Doggett, and maybe just extend that by a minute. And I think that would really help the episode, just to let them kind of connect emotionally, especially since he was working on that task force, and to connect to the child who was abused in Ronnie. And it sounds trite to state that the child in you, but you know what I'm talking about. That it's still clearly there. That relationship between him and Cal is still one of a frightened child and a horrible monster adult.
Well, I think Ronnie could have actually benefited from a final scene. That could have been very effective if they had given him, just a little bit at the very end for the wrap up and kind of reinforce the sympathy angle. He kind of is just lost at the end, really.
Yeah, I liked his performance there with Doggett, but the character, you're right, doesn't get any resolution. And to point back, that is one thing that Millennium episodes, when they do something similar to this, they're generally pretty good about putting a nice coda at the end to kind of come back to the character. So Blood Relatives has something kind of similar from season 1, and again, Through a Glass Darkly. And both of those, to varying effect, I think something similar to that would have worked nicely here. I definitely agree with you. That's a great point. But that scene where Cal cuts his neck with the broken bottle was a really effective moment of horror.
Yes.
That really shocked me, and I said, okay, I mean, that's where this episode is working really well. And I know we're here to critique it, but I want to spend enough time praising it as well. And the scenes between the two of them were electric, but that right there was really effective and disturbing, I thought.
Yep, very much agree.
Now we're going to transition to after the psychic has the episode, going back to there, an ambulance leaves with the psychic, and Doggett talks about how thinks the psychic was just acting, and Scully believes her and brings up the symbol on the forehead, and Doggett comes back with, well, it's just a neat trick.
She did it, but it's a trick.
Yeah, it's stretching credulity there. I mean, she could. I mean, you have makeup effect artists. It's like American Werewolf in London or The Howling. They could have done it. Is it Rick Baker, I guess, was the makeup person who did that? You have somebody like that who could help. That's fine. But this is where it's playing a little bit strong back to the old days of Mulder and Scully, where poor Scully just has to come up with the craziest.
Very much so, yeah.
Then we get the tape recorder being played backwards, where we hear the singing forwards.
Yeah.
And then Ronnie pulls up in his car. Billy appears in the car, and then Ronnie gets scared. Doggett confronts him, and then Doggett is a really good runner. This is one thing I want to comment about. I mean, he kept pace with that car really well until Scully finally blocks him. And Doggett barely winded, so we're learning a lot about him. He's an Olympic athlete.
I have something to say about this scene.
Go for it.
This is one of my pet peeves in filmed productions, and I've been saying this for years. And in fact, this was a joke between my late wife and I for many years, and she would bring it up to other people too. I always get frustrated when there's characters get in a car or and drive off, but they need to be stopped, and nobody ever shoots the tires. You have characters with guns standing around, right? And I always get to the point where I'm practically screaming at the television set or whatever, shoot the tires, shoot the tires. And I haven't done this in quite a long while. And here was me watching this episode, and it was really funny and kind of bittersweet to me because I started yelling, shoot the tires, shoot the tires. I don't get it. You're driving away, you have a gun, they're not that far away. A tire's a fairly big thing, fairly easy to hit if you're a professional with a gun, and just shoot the tires. So the only way I give them an out on this is that Doggett and Deana would have been concerned about Doggett, because Doggett is the one who saw Billy in the car, that he would be concerned that like the car would crash and Billy would be hurt. That's the only out I'm giving that. Otherwise, it's silly. You're an FBI agent. You have a gun. A perp is getting away. Shoot the tires.
That makes you feel better. A week or so ago, I was watching Torchwood Children of Earth, the whole miniseries, and they do shoot the tires.
Oh, good.
So that makes you feel better.
All right, it does. I'm glad somebody. So yeah, believe me, when I do see some a character shoot the tires, I give a resounding cheer. But Deana gets in there and stops the car with her car. But still,
it's a fine scene. They didn't overdo it. It was quick. It ended. It just allowed the confrontation to happen. They can't spend too much time staging things and doing too much, so they don't got enough space. And considering that, it's completely serviceable.
Yep.
And then we cut to Doug, again, the father, filling up the gas, and he's in the car with Josh. And in the background, we see somebody walking a horse, which I thought that's a nice cue just to set that up. Like, oh, if you're paying attention, you see something's about to happen. Josh stays in the car when he pays, and eventually you find out, oh, it's Cal. He's walking the horse. And then Josh gets out to check the horse. And I know there's a world you can explain this psychologically, but Jim, help me out here.
Okay.
You're a kid whose brother disappeared near a pony ride. You think there would be some like semiotics, some fear, like arachnophobia that's imprinted in you, some epigenetic terror that, oh, I see a pony, it's dark. That is a sign to stay away.
Yeah.
But this kid, now let's say that isn't even in. This kid already knows crazy stuff's happening, and his brother was abducted, and he has not had the stranger danger education to not wander over near some sketchy, scary thing in the middle of the night. This is where I think the script needed to have him have posters up in his room of Pony fan, My Little Pony, everything.
Yes.
Something needed to be, because this was just such a plot-driven contrivance behavior that in no world would I imagine this kid behaving the way he did, this calmly, and with everything going on with the family. Sure, you could say any kid could do anything, but this really stuck out to me. I feel bad, blaming the victim, but I'm not blaming the victim, I'm blaming the writer here. I felt like this was too much.
No, totally agree with you on this one. And I remember groaning when he does that. It's like, oh, sure, he's going to go, running off of there in the middle of the night, while his father's doing whatever. He's going to get it. Sure, he's going to get out of the car. Oh, yeah. Right. There is no setup with that child, like you said, of an interest in ponies, horses, whatever, to make him do anything like that. All the crap that's going on, and he does that. And, and you said, like, he knows what happened to his brother. Well, take it one step further. He was actually in the womb when his brother was abducted. You would, if you believe in that sort of thing, you would have thought that just the alarm from his mother at that time would have somehow gotten through to him while he was in the womb, and it would be in his DNA.
As was in epigenetic terror, the intergenerational.
Yeah.
Like a fear of snakes.
But honestly, yes, the episode is at fault. The writing is at fault for giving us no precedent for him doing that. That just was completely a contrivance to get him in a situation to be abducted. I mean, realistically, it would have been more that Cal would have come up to the car and taken him out of the car,
Or Cal could have been having the pony show at the school, and a similar abduction could have happened there.
But
there are other ways to play it.
To have Josh actually walk up to the trailer and what is he, like, he says, "Hey, mister," like, what? What did he think that he was going to do? "Oh, hey, mister, can I pet the pony?" Like, it's in the middle of the night,
And he walks on the opposite side of the trailer when you could just...
Yeah.
It's not like only one side of it is accessible. So why would you not just stay in eye shot of the car? So the staging of the scene and the fact that he could be pulled in by his arms through the trailer and somehow silenced so nobody could hear him. Because you got to think, okay, you're holding his arms through the trailer. He's going to have like a needle ready to drug him that quickly. And then, because somebody's going to walk up to your trailer, so you just have a needle of a sedative ready at all times. The logistics of the scene, they don't fly for me. But that's okay. It's a 45-minute TV show. But that's why it's not a 9 out of 10. It's
earlier on, Doggett accused Scully of lazy thinking. Remember that scene?
Yes.
And so I accuse the writers of lazy writing.
I can also compliment the writers how quickly they had to turn around these scripts and how many restrictions they have and last-minute edits. So I can criticize the story and tease the writer a little bit, but I couldn't do what they're doing.
I admit it. As a writer, I have all the room in the world that I want. I can write a short story. I can write a novel. I can write a double, triple-size novel. I can do whatever I want. But, yeah, I don't know if I could do it. And I've thought about that a lot. Like, wow, what if I had tried to become TV writer or whatever, and you have that very rigid structure, that very rigid time frame, and then to hit the beats for commercials and all of that. Yeah, no, I give them, compliments, for having to fit it into television formats like that.
And I just hear stories about going to filming and then the location that they thought they would have, they don't have anymore, so they got to rewrite it. Oh, we can't actually have the pony show at the school. We just have it at a gas station now, so write a scene really quick. So who knows what happened?
And wait, it was that complete happenstance. Did Cal just was out there, and was that somehow planned? I mean, that's another thing that...
I couldn't imagine being planned, because it shows him walking with the horse back to the trailer. So he got out at the gas station, took a horse out of a trailer, and then just wanted to walk it back in immediately while the dad goes in to pay for the gas.
Yeah.
It would be too many coincidences for that to be planned. It just has to be supernatural at this point.
Well, and again, if there was some sort of precedent with Josh being interested in horses or whatever like that, and if Cal somehow knew that, and then he thought, oh, this will be a great lure. I'll walk across his field of vision with the pony, and he'll come to me.
Maybe we get some like slow-mo shots with sparkles.
All right, we've done this one to death. Go on.
Next up, we're going to head to the police station where we have Doggett, Scully, and Ronnie. And they're going to start to do the interrogation. And we see this nice flashback, which again, I'm sorry for all the XCast listeners who are sick of this here, but it really harkens back to Millennium. We have a flashback with some different shutter speed and lighting effects where we see Ronnie with a needle, suggesting that he used that in public to inject and kidnap Billy. And then we see that he sang him songs. I thought the flashback scene was pretty well done overall, and the interrogation scene itself, some of the dialogue that Robert Patrick's given is a little wooden, it's a little cliche, but my word, he brings his A game. And it just goes to show why Robert Patrick was a genius casting decision for this show. This scene here really highlighted what he can do with some really, really rough dialogue. And the actor playing Ronnie, I want to give him credit here too. So that is Rodney Eastman. I thought did a good job in this scene as well. This was another highly effective scene that just made me want more time spent with Ronnie, Cal, and Doggett, and Scully, and less with the family. That's my summary. What are your thoughts on this major climatic change of the scene here?
Yeah, I have no, problems with Robert Patrick at all. I totally agree. It was a pleasant surprise. I went into this I thought maybe I might not even like the character. I read up a little bit and found out that he was fairly controversial at the time. And I saw that like Chris Carter was defending the character, but no, Patrick does a very good job. Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty standard, like, talk to me now, tell me, come on, tell me now. And then finally, it comes out. The flashback was really very well done. Nice note of terror. One of the things that I thought about at that moment is, we're talking about the constraints of television, like time, but there's also, as far as like censoring or whatever, I sympathize with the writers and producers that have a story about child abuse, child abduction, and the murder of a child. And how much do you actually show? How much do you actually tell? How much do you actually show the child in, danger? Because that's really going to hit an unfortunate large number of viewers, something like that. How much do you show a child in danger? Going way back, you really couldn't at all, and then things got a little looser. But still, it would have been interesting to hear how much there were discussions about, well, we don't really want to, you have a child tied up and taped up and underneath that thing and all of that, and what's coming. We know that, finally we know that the child was killed. Billy was killed. Chilling things to think about.
Very true. Where do you draw that line? And going back to, but the time is now. The podcast it finished the final episode, so I just have to talk about it here. It has some reminders of, there's an episode in season 1 of Millennium called The Well-Worn Lock, which deals with child abuse. It's an extremely disturbing episode, but I think they do a fairly good job of keeping the explicitness. It doesn't seem as exploitive as it could be. It's not a perfect episode, I'm not going to state that. But one of the key things is the episode is very survivor-centered. It's not focused so much on this nebulous bad guy and the villain. I don't want to simplify it and make it sound so simple as that. Is problematized in a way that the community can't really believe that this person would do the thing. So it's very much acting in this real world crime and using the explicitness to help illustrate that something this horrible can go hidden for this long and supported by the community because of this trust, this blind trust of people, and not supporting of the victims or the survivors. And that's where I think they have to be extra cautious in this episode, because it isn't really about the victim. And the only victim it's really about is Ronnie, who actually gets any sort of emotional resonance to about their experience and their trauma, really. And they don't give him enough time. So I'm quite glad that they pulled their punches and didn't make it too exploitative, because that's not really what it's about.
Right.
And the final thing is one of the comments that you made there, which I don't think, I'm not trying to say you're wrong. A lot of the dialogue is, tell me more, what Doggett's trying to say. It's a standard interrogation scene. I think where it's elevated a little bit more, from my perspective, where I came to the episode, where I took away, is it highlights again his work on the task force. And I saw Doggett talking to him as a victim, in the sense of Doggett recognizes this person been gaslit and controlled and abused, that it's not that he doesn't want to talk, it's that he physically can't talk. It's like the backpack scene at the beginning. And it would have been nice, I think, script-wise, would have been pretty elegant to tie in that scene with the backpack in the interrogation room at the beginning with this scene, so we can really see the child victim within Ronnie and the struggle that's going on. Instead, a lot of that has to come through the performances, and luckily both actors are really up to it. But I wish, again, going back to what you were talking about with the coda for Ronnie, I wish that center was there more, because then we could connect to Josh and we could connect to Billy more through Ronnie as our emotive, conscious, present actor in the story that is the victim.
Yeah, I can only agree with you. I totally see where you're coming from there, and it could have happened, and you have pointed it out, more than once, about trim over here, and then you have the space to have it here, over here. I'm looking at it as a writer, and I totally see where it could have been done.
And this is one of the reasons I like the episode. It could be embellished a little bit more, but I like the subtlety of Doggett's performance, that you see an anger and you see a grief and you see a passion for why he's so driven by this case, but they don't hammer it home. They don't really over-egg the pudding, as you might say. It's played so nicely, and in the end, it feels like a nice meat and potatoes introduction to the character and gives a place for it to grow. And it doesn't feel cheap and manipulative, at least on the character level. There are ways you could critique the episode, but at least it pumped the brakes there, and I really got to give it credit.
A thought occurs to me. I'd be interested to know, was there any criticism of the character of Doggett of being too much like Mulder, in the sense that Mulder had the whole thing about his sister, and then Doggett has the whole thing about his son?
That's a great question, and I've wondered that myself, but I have not asked that, so this is all on you. I would love to hear maybe from some of the other XCast listeners who are much more knowledgeable about fandom at the time, because I wasn't watching it then. I just know the critique everybody says is that he wasn't Mulder, and a lot of the traditional fans or the shippers found it too much. Like, oh, you can't have the X-Files without this, and the dynamic between the two characters was... the chemistry wasn't the same. It was a different chemistry. And I get that for people who didn't want the change. I'm not going to criticize them for that. I think it was great, but though I don't know if this was an actual issue about the parallels. But I think the X-Files and a lot of things repeat itself anyways, character-wise. There's lots of dualities and loops, and people could write it off that way. But it's a great question. Definitely worth bringing up. Thanks.
I had to chuckle a little bit because I read a quote from Chris Carter when he was defending the character of Doggett, and he said, because of this or that, and then really the whole dynamic just changes right there. And I thought, well, no, not actually. It's still the same. You have the skeptic, and you have the sort of more or less the believer. It's like it only changed, the roles changed. It didn't, the dynamic didn't necessarily change. You still had the butting of heads between the two characters about what is really going on here. So I just had to kind of chuckle. I think he was just kind of grasping at straws there.
To be fair to Carter, he had just spent 5 years being constantly attacked by shippers.
Okay.
And I'm guessing in his head, the dynamic that he is shifting from is one of romantic obsession, at least in the fandom world, to the dynamic of completely platonic.
Yeah.
And at no point ever is their relationship ever hinted at as being anything but platonic, being Doggett and Scully. And for me, as someone who prefers the storytelling that way, it was a breath of fresh air, and it was a completely different dynamic.
Okay.
The believer-skeptic can't change the dynamic, is just the purpose, the way the show works, and you need to have that tension. That's a devil's advocate thing. I don't think you're wrong to take that position, but where his writing, some of it became kind of passive-aggressive against the shipping community, You could maybe see that that's where he was playing a very defensive card at that comment.
Yeah. Well, that's happened a lot in different properties where the fans have gotten, sorry, obsessed with things, and a creator of that thing says, well, I'm going to poke my finger in their eye. I'm not going to keep giving them what they want anymore. I'm thinking about, here's a good example. I think it's a good example. George Lucas. The Force and Jedis in Star Wars became an obsession to people, where people took it to the lengths of saying it was a religion, like trying to make it a real religion in the real world. In my opinion, Lucas pushed back on that because he didn't want that to happen. He didn't like that, and he didn't want that to happen. So he does the prequel movies, and in Phantom Menace, he comes up with midi-chlorians, which was something that most people hated the idea of. He tried to make the Force a scientific thing, gave it like a sort of a Star Trek explanation to take that away from the people that were trying to take it in a different direction. So I almost feel that same thing here, that where Carter's like, well, I'm not going to give them any more rope here. I'm going to turn this whole, shipping thing around.
Let us transition to, they eventually find Josh in the horse trailer. And this is something I want to mention here because I've already mentioned 1,000 times. This also harkens back to Millennium in episode 1 of season 2, which also has a human cage under a vehicle that is used to transport people to secret locations. In this episode, it makes me wonder, he's got this secret compartment under horse trailers. Is that a common thing in horse trailers? Because the ones I've seen growing up around horses, I've never seen that. And so, assuming that if it's not, he built this thing and he's captured how many kids? Right now we only know Billy and Josh, but it's maybe implied there's more. But then the story suggests that there's only Billy because of Cal confronting him earlier about what he has buried out in the woods, and that we don't get a coda suggesting that maybe there are more bodies. But the fact that he has that secret compartment, to me, suggests that Cal is a serial killer.
Yeah, I can't imagine why else he'd have that compartment there. And as far as I know, no, there wouldn't really be any reason to have that normally in a trailer like that. Or at least I don't think so.
They chase, in my notes, I just was calling Cal Creepo there at this point, into the woods. And there's the confrontation, and then Doggett sees Billy's ghost and finds his skull. And we get this nice reaction shot of Doggett where he has the realization. He finally comes to accept, okay, I think I did see a ghost. Played really well by Robert Patrick there, I thought. What are your thoughts about this closing up until the argument? We'll get into that between Doggett and Scully, but the general confrontation between Cal, Doggett, and the ghost. What are your thoughts?
It's handled very well. Yeah, I hate to say it. I don't really have much more to say than that. It was a nice touch to allow him to see Billy one more time. It's really interesting that throughout the entire episode that the word ghost is never used once. And that's fascinating to me because that may not be exactly what it was. But going back to that scene, yeah, the whole thing, the chase, the capture, and then Doggett actually says, doesn't he actually say the kid's right here or
yes.
something like? And then he looks again, and he's gone. So all done very well.
We end with a scene with Doggett and Scully arguing, and Scully says this here: I know where you are, I've been there, that you feel you failed, that you have to explain this somehow. So here we get a nice little bit more of the interpersonal dynamic between the two of them, and some of this empathy and callback to Scully and her growth. And Anderson gets a moment to actually act. She isn't given a ton to do in this episode, and this is one of the few moments where she is given something to do. And I think she always is good, so I don't even need to comment on that. She's a phenomenal actor. What are your thoughts?
It's Doggett's episode, so I agree with that too. Her saying that is another example of me, the viewer, thinking that in my head, and with the need for the characters to say it, and she does. And I really love that line. I've been there. She's trying to reach out after them really butting heads and kind of arguing the whole time. She reaches out empathetically and to say, okay, I know what you're going through right at this moment. I've been there. I used to be in your shoes.
As our podcast nears the twice as long as the actual episode mark, that brings our discussion to a close. Jim, again, it's wonderful to talk to you in our semi-annual, I'm not sure how to classify that, our every now in season, or say our once a season chat.
Yeah, a recurring.
It's great to catch up with you. If you would please share what you've been up to and where folks can find more about you and connect with you online.
Boy, I'm trying to think of what all have I done since the last time we talked? Kind of a lot. I really, in the past year, ramped up writing and my self-publishing. I kind of got back up on the horse after the death of my wife, and writing and publishing has really, been a solace to me, I guess. I published my very first epic fantasy novel. It's a genre that I haven't yet ever done, but I enjoy, and I finally published that. It's called The Nine Nations, Book 1, The Sliding World. It's going to be actually a duology, a 2-volume set. So the first one is out. If anybody wants to, they can go to Amazon and just put in my name under books, and my author page should come up. I'm just about to publish the third and last volume in my my look at the Batman TV series of the 1960s, the Adam West. It's been 3 volumes. Each volume looks at a season of the show, and I'm in the final stages before publication of the third volume. You'll see those up there too. Why? What? I had an official Green Hornet novel come out from the same company that did my Kolchak novel, which is Moonstone Books. That was a real thrill to cross Green Hornet off of my bucket list, and that's based on the Van Williams Bruce Lee 60s TV series. Boy, I just not remembering exactly when the last time we talked. It seems like there's been a lot of things, but you can see all my stuff on Amazon. I'm on Facebook under The Beard, the Jim Beard fan page, and then I'm on Twitter at writer Jim Beard.
Well, congratulations on a productive year and making most of us feel very lazy.
No.
Yeah.
But hey, I am a horribly lazy person. Procrastination is my middle name, believe me.
Well, regardless, congratulations on all of those great publications. Everybody go check out the page on Facebook and the Amazon page and then Moonstone Books. And Jim, until next time, trust no one.
Elsewhere on We Made This. A Dream Given Form, a Babylon 5 podcast.
The isolationism is talked about a lot in the episode with this entire, but Londo's isolation is so heartbreaking to watch. Their final scene of dialogue together between Londo and Jakar it's so powerful when Jakar says, I can't forgive this entire, but I can forgive you. And that music as Londo touches Jakar's arm and leaves gives me goosebumps. It's so beautifully done.
I'm not going to lie, that I kind of welled up when Jakar forgave him. It really does.
Yeah,
it really does get me. But yeah, it's a very sad story, but that's what makes Londo's journey such a captivating journey to watch throughout the 5 seasons.
Free with this month's issue.
This is Skin Lab and Dissolve.
Yep.
That f***ing riff, man.
What a track.
So good.
I love that lyric as well. I'm disappointed that he didn't write it himself.
Did he not?
No.
Which one?
It's not what they call It's What You Answer To is a W.C. Fields quote. I've just looked it up.
Ah. Oh, I quite like that even more now.
For a second there, I thought you were going to say it was a WCW quote.
Yeah. Ah, Sting coming out Yeah, bit of that Eric Bischoff in the middle of the ring. Yeah, let's re-record it, and Ian, if you could just say that, that'd be fantastic. Sure. But no, I love this. It's definitely Machine Head influence, isn't it? I mean, they're from San Francisco, so which isn't a million miles away from the Bay Area, of course. But,
there's a bit of Far Beyond Driven era Pantera in there as well, particularly with the deep, low voice in the verses.
Oh yeah.
Geek Polymath.
So what is it about RuPaul's Drag Race that particularly appeals to you over everything else that you could possibly like in geek culture?
It's impossible to narrow it down to one thing because it's literally everything about it is everything that I like. So you've got legitimate competition because 9 times out of 10, the loser is the one who does the worst. So one of the problems with reality TV is that they keep the controversial people in and they send home the boring people. That's something that happens in reality, and it becomes quite disappointing.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network. The Xcast and X-Files podcast was created by Tony Black and is produced and hosted by Carl Sweeney, Sarah Blair and Kurt North.
You can find the podcast on Twitter at the X_cast, on Facebook by typing in the Xcast, and in our group, X-Files Basement, the Xcast podcast fan group, and on Instagram at the Xcast pod.
Don't forget, you can support the show by becoming a member on Patreon. Our patrons get early access to episodes, behind-the-scenes chats with our hosts and a thriving community of X-Files, and other premium interviews and specials. To find out more and subscribe, you can go to patreon.com/thexcast. That's patreon.com/thexcast.
We are also part of the We Made This podcast network, full of popular culture shows, including our Millennium series, The Time Is Now. You can find all of our shows at our website, wemadethispod.com, or via Twitter at wemadethispod.
Thanks for listening and keep watching the skies.